December 24, 2019, the Lamb and Flag pub in Llanfairpwll, Wales. Vincent Cain hadn't killed anyone in 15 years. Tonight, that was about to change. 12 men walked through his village that snowy evening, professional killers, each one capable of ending governments. They came for the mechanic who fixed tractors and played chess with pensioners. By midnight, 11 bodies lay scattered across the Welsh countryside. One man walked away carrying an envelope sealed in blood. What Vincent discovered in those final moments changed everything he thought he knew about family, betrayal, and the night that made him disappear. The surviving assassin's message would force him to choose between the daughter he'd die for and the truth that could destroy her. Some secrets are buried so deep that digging them up kills everyone you love. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The first killer arrived at 8:47 p.m., his breath forming crystalline clouds in the frigid Welsh air. Vincent Cain spotted him through the frosted window of his workshop, a shadow moving with predatory precision between the stone cottages that lined the village square. 15 years of playing the harmless mechanic vanished in an instant. Vincent's calloused fingers found the Glock 19 taped beneath his workbench without conscious thought. Muscle memory from a life he'd buried deeper than the bodies in London's industrial district. The gun felt foreign yet familiar in his grip, a lover's touch after decades of separation. The second man emerged from behind the Methodist chapel, then a third from the post office alley. They moved like wolves circling wounded prey, each maintaining visual contact with their partners through subtle hand signals that spoke of military training and shared kills. Vincent's phone buzzed. Sarah's name lit the screen. "Dad, are you coming for dinner? Tommy's been asking about his granddad all day." His heart clenched. Sarah, the daughter he'd discovered 3 years ago when she moved to Llanfairpwll with her 5-year-old son, fleeing an abusive husband. She'd rented the cottage next to his garage, and something in her green eyes had stirred memories he'd tried to forget. The same eyes that had stared back at him from newspaper photos 15 years ago, when he'd been hired to eliminate a government whistleblower named Michael Harrison. The same eyes that belonged to Harrison's infant daughter in the photo Vincent had found clutched in the dead man's hand. "Running late, love," he whispered into the phone. "Keep Tommy inside tonight. Lock the doors." Through the window, he counted shadows, 8 visible. 4 more would be positioned at the village exits, standard elimination protocol. His former colleagues had taught him well. The workshop door exploded inward as the first killer made his move. Professional, silent, lethal. Vincent was already moving. The Glock barked twice in the darkness. The first round caught the assassin center mass, spinning him into the tool rack. The second punched through his throat, painting the whitewashed walls crimson. No hesitation, no remorse. The Reaper had awakened. Vincent rolled behind his workbench as automatic weapon fire shredded the air where he'd stood. Sparks erupted from damaged machinery, the acrid smell of gunpowder mixed with motor oil and death. "Vincent Cain," a voice called from the darkness. "Cultured, educated, someone from the old days. You've led us quite a chase, old friend." Vincent recognized the accent. Public school. Oxford, perhaps. The kind of voice that ordered executions over afternoon tea. "Cromwell," Vincent breathed. "Very good. Though it's Director Cromwell now. Her Majesty's government has been most generous with promotions." Vincent's blood turned to ice. Cromwell, the handler who'd given him the Harrison contract 15 years ago. The man who'd sworn the target was a terrorist selling state secrets. The man Vincent had trusted until he'd seen the truth in Harrison's eyes as life faded from them. "The Harrison job," Vincent said, checking his ammunition. "You lied." "I protected Queen and country. Harrison was going to expose Operation Blackwater. 50 years of intelligence networks would have burned. He was trying to expose child trafficking rings, government-protected ones." Cromwell's laughter echoed off the stone walls. Such moral clarity from a man who's killed 47 people for money. Harrison's bleeding heart would have destroyed more lives than it saved. Vincent thought of Sarah, of Tommy. of the terrible truth he'd been carrying like a tumor in his chest for 3 years. "You're here because I kept the files," Vincent said. "You're here because you've been playing house with the wrong little girl." The words hit harder than bullets. Vincent's worst fears crystallizing into reality, movement in his peripheral vision. 2 more killers flanking through the side entrance. Vincent put 3 rounds into the first one's chest, watched him crumple like discarded newspaper. The second man's shot went wide, chipping stone near Vincent's head. Vincent's return fire was surgical, clean, final. "How many more need to die tonight, Vincent?" Cromwell called. "Surrender now and the girl lives. Continue this dance and she becomes collateral damage." Through the shattered window, Vincent saw muzzle flashes near Sarah's cottage. His vision turned crimson. The Reaper was fully awake now. He'd spent 15 years learning to be human again, learning to love, learning to hope. But some transformations were reversible, and violence was a language he spoke with native fluency. The remaining killers had made one critical error. They'd threatened his family. Vincent Kane emerged from behind the workbench like death incarnate, the Glock extended in a perfect Weaver stance. His first shot took out the overhead light, plunging the workshop into darkness that favored the predator over the prey. In the blackness that followed, only screams and muzzle flashes marked the beginning of a reckoning 15 years in the making. By morning, the snow would run red, and Vincent would face the truth that some fathers kill for love, even when that love is built on the bones of the past. The darkness was Vincent's cathedral, and he moved through it with the reverence of a priest conducting final rites. 3 heartbeats, 2 by the entrance, 1 circling toward the rear window. Vincent's ears, sharpened by 15 years of paranoid vigilance, passed the symphony of violence with conductor's precision. Boot leather on concrete, the metallic whisper of weapon safeties disengaging. Cromwell's measured breathing from somewhere near the overturned oil drum. Vincent slid between the shadows of his workshop like smoke, each step placed with surgical care. This place had been his sanctuary for 8 years, every creaking floorboard memorized, every tool positioned with obsessive precision. Sarah often teased him about his compulsions, how he'd rearrange the wrench set if she moved even 1 piece. She thought it was endearing, this old man's need for order. She didn't know it was survival instinct disguised as domesticity. The first killer moved past Vincent's position, night vision goggles painting the world in alien green. Vincent rose behind him like a nightmare-given form, his left hand clamping over the man's mouth while the Glock's barrel found the sweet spot at the base of his skull. The suppressed shot was barely louder than a champagne cork popping. Vincent counted automatically. He'd stopped tallying after the Harrison job, but muscle memory was a cruel accountant. "Lost one of your boys, Cromwell," Vincent called softly, lowering the body with practiced care. "Was he someone's son? Someone's father? Spare me the conscience crisis, Vincent. We both know you're a killer by nature, not nurture." But that was where Cromwell was wrong. Vincent had been a killer by nature once, empty, efficient, remorseless. Then Sarah had knocked on his workshop door 3 years ago, Tommy hiding behind her legs, both of them bearing the particular fragility of recent survivors. She'd needed her ancient Land Rover fixed and had no money to pay for it. Vincent had seen those green eyes, Michael Harrison's eyes staring back at him from a face that should have been impossible, and felt something crack open in his chest. A wound that had been festering for 12 years suddenly began to bleed hope instead of poison. He'd fixed her car for free, then her cottage's heating, then the loose floorboard in Tommy's room that creaked with nightmares. Small repairs that had slowly rebuilt the human parts of Vincent Kane that the Reaper had cannibalized long ago. The second killer was advancing toward the workbench, assault rifle sweeping in controlled arcs. Vincent tracked him through the maze of half-repaired vehicles, noting the tactical vest, the professional stance, the way he moved with a killer's economy of motion. They sent their best, Vincent realized. This wasn't just an elimination, it was a demonstration, a message to anyone else who might have inconvenient knowledge about Operation Blackwater. Vincent's phone vibrated against his chest. Sarah again, probably wondering why her father figure was taking so long with whatever project was keeping him from Christmas Eve dinner. She'd made Tommy help wrap Vincent's present, A framed photo of the three of them from last month's village fair, Tommy grinning gap-toothed between the only two adults he trusted completely. The memory of that afternoon struck Vincent with physical force. Tommy's sticky fingers clutching cotton candy while Sarah laughed at Vincent's attempts to win a stuffed elephant from the ring toss. For 3 perfect hours, Vincent had forgotten he was a man with 47 kills on his conscience. He'd been simply Tommy's granddad, Sarah's protective neighbor, a mechanic who told terrible jokes and knew how to make paper airplanes that actually flew. The second killer was close enough now that Vincent could smell his aftershave, something expensive that belonged to boardrooms rather than battlefields. Another Cromwell recruit, probably, fresh-faced university graduate who'd been told he was protecting national security while learning to put bullets in inconvenient people. Vincent moved like Mercury in the darkness, his approach masked by the sound of wind rattling the workshop's tin roof. The killer never saw him coming, never felt anything after Vincent's blade found the gap between his cervical vertebrae. 49. "You're running out of boys, Director," Vincent said, wiping the knife clean on the dead man's tactical vest. "How many mothers won't see their sons come home because you couldn't let sleeping dogs lie?" "Enough philosophy, Vincent. You know why we're here. Harrison's files, the insurance policy you've been hiding like a coward for 15 years. Vincent closed his eyes, seeing Michael Harrison's face in those final moments. The government analyst had been trying to expose a trafficking network that reached into Parliament itself, and Vincent had killed him for it. Killed a father who'd been fighting to save children just like his own infant daughter. The daughter who now called Vincent Dad and made him Christmas dinner and trusted him to keep the monsters away. "The files burn with me," Vincent said, meaning every word. From outside came the unmistakable sound of Sarah's cottage door slamming open. Vincent's world collapsed into crystalline focus. The Reaper smiled in the darkness, and Cromwell's remaining killers had no idea they'd just awakened something far worse than a ghost. They'd awakened a father. Vincent erupted from the workshop like a force of nature unleashed. The careful restraint that had defined 15 years of voluntary exile evaporated in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Through Sarah's cottage windows he could see tactical lights sweeping across her living room, predators hunting his family while he'd been playing games in the darkness. The remaining killers outside never expected the hunted to become the hunter. Vincent's first shot punched through the skull of the man positioned behind Sarah's garden gate. The second and third rounds found the sniper on the Methodist chapel roof before gravity claimed his body. Vincent moved like liquid death between the stone cottages, the Glock an extension of his will, each trigger pull a promise written in blood. 50, 51. "Sarah!" Vincent's roar split the night air, but no response came from the cottage. The silence was a knife twisting in his chest, sharper than any physical wound. Tommy's laugh, Sarah's humming while she cooked Sunday dinner, the gentle sounds of the family he'd never deserved, all of it might already be echoes. Cromwell's voice drifted from the workshop, amplified by some kind of speaker system. "She's alive, Vincent, for now, but my associates inside have very specific instructions about what happens if you continue this bloody rampage." Vincent pressed his back against the cottage's stone wall, forcing his breathing to slow, his tactical mind to override the father's panic. Through the window, he could see Sarah zip-tied to her kitchen chair, blood trickling from her nose. Tommy was nowhere visible. Hidden, Vincent prayed, not dead. But it was the third figure in the room that made Vincent's world tilt on its axis. The man standing behind Sarah wore an expensive suit instead of tactical gear. Silver-haired, patrician features, a face Vincent recognized from newspaper photos spanning 3 decades of government service. Sir Reginald Ashworth, Deputy Director of MI6, Member of Parliament, the kind of untouchable establishment figure who collected knighthoods like trinkets. The man whose name appeared 17 times in Harrison's hidden files. The man who'd been running child trafficking operations through government channels since the 1980s. The man Vincent was supposed to have eliminated 15 years ago, except Harrison had died first, taking the location of the evidence with him to his grave. Except Harrison hadn't taken it to his grave. He'd hidden it with Vincent, trusting the assassin's professional paranoia to keep the files safe even after death. Vincent's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but he recognized Cromwell's style. "Time for truth, old friend. Come inside, alone. No weapons. Learn what you really killed Harrison to protect." Vincent stared at the message, his finger hovering over the screen. In that cottage sat the architect of horrors that had destroyed thousands of children's lives. The man Harrison had died trying to expose. The man Vincent could eliminate with a single well-placed shot through the kitchen window. But Sarah was in that room. Sarah, who made him tea every morning and called him the best father she'd ever had. Sarah, who didn't know her real father had been a hero, that the man she'd adopted as family was his killer. The cottage door opened, and Ashworth himself appeared in the doorway. No fear in his posture, only the confidence of a man who'd spent decades believing himself beyond consequences. "Vincent Kane," Ashworth called, his voice carrying the same public school authority that had shaped empires and buried inconvenient truths. "Do come in. It's time you learned the full scope of your masterpiece." "I know what you are," Vincent said, keeping the Glock trained on Ashworth's center mass. Harrison's files detailed everything: the children, the networks, the government protection. Ashworth's smile was arctic. "Dear boy, you know nothing." Harrison's investigation barely scratched the surface. Operation Blackwater wasn't about protecting trafficking networks, it was about using them. Creating a web of compromised officials, blackmail material, controlled assets across every level of government and society. The words hit Vincent like physical blows. "You're lying." "The children were always expendable, Vincent, cannon fodder in a larger game. But the intelligence gathered from those who used our services, priceless. Every judge, every politician, every business leader who indulged their darkest appetites became our asset. A shadow government built on controlled depravity." Vincent's vision tunneled. Sarah is the daughter of the one man who could have exposed everything. Harrison wasn't just a whistleblower. He was documenting the complete network. Names, dates, financial records, video evidence. Enough to bring down 3 governments. Ashworth stepped closer, reading the horror in Vincent's expression like a favorite book. "When you killed him, Vincent, you didn't just eliminate a threat, you became the inheritor of his life's work. The files you've been hiding? They're not just evidence of crimes, they're the operational manual for the largest intelligence operation in British history. And now, after 15 years of protection, you're going to hand them over." Vincent's hands trembled as the full weight of his ignorance crashed down. He hadn't just killed a father trying to protect children, he'd murdered the one man capable of destroying a system that had been feeding on innocence for decades. The cottage door slammed shut behind Ashworth, and Vincent realized his old life hadn't just ended. It had been revealed as a lie from the very beginning. Vincent stood frozen in the snow, Ashworth's words echoing in his skull like ricocheting bullets. The cottage door had become a barrier between 2 worlds, the lie he'd been living and the truth that would destroy everything he'd built from its ashes. He tried to push it away, this revelation that felt like swallowing broken glass. Tried to focus on what mattered: Sarah bleeding in that chair, Tommy hidden somewhere in the cottage, 12 killers sent to eliminate the last witness to something so vast that his understanding of it kept shifting like quicksand beneath his feet. Just get them out, Vincent told himself. Save them first. Deal with the rest later. But his hands wouldn't stop shaking. The Glock felt foreign in his grip, as if 15 years of careful domesticity had suddenly made him a stranger to violence. He, who had once been London's most efficient killer, now found himself paralyzed by the simple act of opening a cottage door, because opening it meant facing Sarah while knowing what he'd done to her father. Vincent's phone buzzed. Sarah's number. His finger hovered over the screen before accepting the call. "Vincent?" Her voice was smaller than he'd ever heard it, tight with controlled fear. "They want to talk to you. Are you hurt?" The words came out strangled. "I'm okay. Tommy's okay. They let me hide him upstairs. But Vincent, the man here, he knows things about my father, about you. He says..." The phone crackled as someone else took it. "She doesn't know, does she?" Ashworth's cultured tones were almost gentle. 3 years of playing happy families, and you never told her who you really are. How delightfully domestic of you. Let them go. Vincent's voice had found its edge again, the razor-sharp certainty that had made him London's most feared assassin. They're not part of this. Oh, but they're the only part that matters now. Do you know what Sarah used to do before she moved to your quaint little village, Vincent? She was a journalist, investigative work, following in her father's footsteps without even knowing it. Quite good at it too, until someone started threatening her. Someone who didn't want her digging into historical child welfare cases. Vincent's blood turned to ice water. You've been watching her. We've been protecting her, keeping her distracted with a quiet country life, a ready-made father figure, the illusion of safety. She stopped asking dangerous questions the moment she found you, Vincent. Amazing how maternal instincts can redirect even the most persistent curiosity. Through the kitchen window, Vincent could see Sarah's silhouette. She was looking toward the door, toward where she knew he must be standing, and even from this distance he could read the trust in her posture. After 3 years, she still believed he would fix whatever was broken, still had faith that her adopted father could keep the monsters away. She had no idea she was sitting 10 feet from the architect of her worst nightmares. Vincent tried to move toward the cottage, but his legs felt like lead. The weight of Ashworth's revelation was crushing the careful compartmentalization that had allowed him to function these past 3 years. Every Sunday dinner, every bedtime story he'd read to Tommy, every time Sarah had smiled at him with such uncomplicated affection, all of it built on a foundation of blood and lies. His phone rang again. Not Sarah this time, a number he hadn't seen in 8 years but recognized instantly. Marcus Webb, his former handler before Cromwell, the man who'd recruited him off the streets of Manchester when Vincent was 19, and full of rage with nowhere to aim it. Vincent answered without speaking. Jesus Christ, Vinny. Marcus's voice was hoarse, exhausted. Tell me you're not still there. Tell me you ran. Marcus? They came to my house tonight. My house, Vinny. 20-year retirement, clean record, pension sorted, and they still came. Wanted to know if I'd heard from you recently, if I knew where you might have hidden Harrison's files. Vincent pressed his back against the cottage wall, suddenly understanding the scope of what was happening. What did you tell them? Nothing. But they didn't need me to tell them anything. They already knew about the girl, about the boy. They've been watching you for years, you daft bastard. Waiting. For what? Marcus's laugh was bitter. For you to become exactly what you became. Soft, vulnerable, someone with something to lose. The Vincent Kane I'd trained would have burned those files and disappeared into the wind 15 years ago. But you built yourself a family instead, made yourself into exactly the kind of target you used to eliminate. Through the window, Vincent saw Ashworth check his watch with the casual precision of a man accustomed to schedules being kept. Even from outside, Vincent could feel the weight of those pale eyes, the patient calculation of someone who had spent decades turning people's love against them. The cottage door opened again. Vincent, Ashworth called. I'm afraid we really must move things along. Sarah's becoming rather distressed, and young Tommy keeps asking for his grandfather. Such a trusting child. I'd hate for his faith to be disappointed.